What's up, YouTube? I am super happy to finally post a video. I know it's been a little while, and I do apologize about that. Today's video, however, is going to start off a little different. Before we continue with our Daenerys chapter, if you want to go ahead and skip ahead a couple minutes, feel free to. I just want to take a moment to have a bit of a heart to heart with my audience and our community here, just person to person, and let you all know a little bit about myself on a more personal level for anyone who may be interested. A goal of mine is to build a positive community where we all just bond over this thing that we all love and make everyone feel welcomed in the process of doing that. And I feel like in order to do that successfully, I do have to sort of open up a little bit and just let you all know about me so you can get to know me as a human being. I am kind of a shy individual at first, but I do open up pretty quickly. And in order to do that, I do want to provide a bit of an explanation slash life update as to why it's been over a month since my last video. So essentially, unfortunately, lots of stress has been why I've fallen behind making these videos. It has nothing to do with the actual process of making these videos. I actually have a ton of fun putting these videos together, and a big part of the reason why I even started making these videos was just to decompress a bit and just talk about this thing that I love so much and it just means so much to me, and just in the process act a little silly and pretty much just keep on yapping, right? It's more so the personal ongoings of everyday life that has me a bit bent out of shape. I for sure have been battling depression. It's not like chronic or anything too serious, thankfully, but lately I've been in a bit of a funk, to say the least. I'm one of the many people in the world that hates their job, which I do feel like is a big part of the problem for me. Just at work, they keep changing a bunch of work policies, and it's just been making life more difficult, to say the least. And a lot of helicopter managing going on, if to say the least. And I already have I have to work a lot of overtime just to make ends meet, and the problem is I do still make, somewhat decent money, but I really can't afford to take a pay cut and go somewhere else. Plus, all within this past month since my last video, I've gotten a nearly $2,000 bill from the mechanic. He's telling me I should get rid of my car due to the issues that I'm having, and it's just really unfortunate because I just paid off my car last year. And then before I even went to the mechanic, I already had an appointment at the vet scheduled for my dogs to get spayed and neutered for my girl and my boy. And that was just another couple $100 that I already didn't really have. And then in addition to that, this is the big news. I found out my girlfriend of 7 years is actually pregnant, which was a total surprise to the both of us because she's actively on birth control. Then we go to the doctor, and not only do we find out she's pregnant and they confirm that, but we actually find out she is 7 months pregnant. We had no idea whatsoever, obviously. She was showing practically no signs or symptoms at all, believe it or not. In my opinion, her belly's like not big at all. She's hardly showing. Now, since we found out, her belly's starting to pop a little bit more. But essentially, she's literally been pregnant since October of last year. And we just found that out, and like we're in a full-on panic now because we did not want kids, especially at the very least right now. We always talk about our future regularly. I feel like that's what you got to do to maintain a healthy relationship, is just talk things through, and we certainly do that, and we try to plan things accordingly. We wanted to get married first, spend more time together, just her and I as man and wife. Marriage is a completely different obstacle compared to just regular dating, and to say the least, it's been a hell of a month, and I'm still trying to figure everything out. One thing for certain, though, is that I am still committed to the channel and getting these videos out because it does bring me a personal joy to get these videos posted for everyone, as well as getting the chance to interact with everybody in the comment section. it genuinely puts a great, huge smile on my face, and it does temporarily just make all my problems go away while I'm in the process and just in the zone of being a content creator, right? It's a lot of fun. So, anyways, I just want to thank you all for listening to me yap, right? I really appreciate the community we are starting to build here. I have much love for every single one of you. Hopefully, soon we get to celebrate having 10 subscribers as we are trying to grow. And now let's go ahead and continue with the story with our girl, Daenerys Targaryen. Continuing where we last left off in Daenerys' first chapter, she revealed to us that she is still a child of just 13 years old. I feel the need to highlight that because she has already gone through so much just in the base information going into her origin story. She's practically been through hell and back already, and she is still only just now starting her journey of becoming the Dragon Queen. Daenerys, she does continue to critique Illyrio Mopatis, who is Magister Illyrio. It's his full name, as Magister is only a title given to a wealthy merchant lord within the 9 free cities of Essos. Dany begins to question Illyrio's kindness and finds his sudden support interesting, to say the least. As in Dany's own words, they live in a mansion, eat his food, and get their every desire fulfilled by his servants. Yet despite this, he asks for nothing in return. Or at least not yet, I suppose. After voicing Dany's concerns to her older brother Viserys, he responds by just dismissing them completely, stating, Illyrio is no fool. The Magister knows that I will not forget my friends when I come into my throne. We then get our first description of Viserys Targaryen from his sister, Daenerys, as she states, he was a gaunt young man with nervous hands and a feverish look in his pale, lilac eyes. Dany then informs us more about Illyrio and how he managed to make his fortune, which pays for the mansion in Pentos that they've been living in for the past 6 months. Dany states that Illyrio is a merchant who sells a variety of things, including spices, gemstones, dragonbone, and I quote, other less savory things. Dany then informs us that Illyrio is a very influential man, stating that he has friends in all 9 of the free cities. I will now show you a map to show the location of the free cities of Essos, which do include Braavos, Lorath, Lys, Myr, Norvos, Pentos, Qohar, Tyrosh, Volantis. Now, I would like to offer some general information about the free cities and exactly why they're referred to as free, as it has to do with the fact that the cities slowly over time since their creation have become independent and self-governing, which wasn't always the case. 8 of the 9 free cities were colonies of Old Valyria. Old Valyria used to govern these cities in the past when Valyria was at its peak in terms of power, wealth, and influence. All except Braavos, which was actually a secret city in its origin, as it was founded by slaves who were headed to Valyria, but while on the ship they fought for their freedom, overthrowing their slave masters and eventually creating the secret city of Braavos, which at the time was kept a secret due to the fear of being attacked and forced to face enslavement once again. Now, this is a good point, or a good part to mention, that Old Valyria was a very oppressive state / country, whatever you'd label them as they were an absolute powerhouse that had to absolutely no one to oppose them in any of the crazy shit that they wanted to do. They did whatever they want and their power remained unchecked. This is due to the advancements that they've made with their equipment, such as Valyrian steel. Plus, they even had different forms of magic, and that's not even mentioning that they even had dragons. Not much that anyone can do in order to stop that. The Targaryens, funny enough, do come from Old Valyria, but they were generally considered one of the weaker families, and in no way, shape, or form were one of the big dogs or major threats when it came to relation to Valyria and its great noble houses. The other free cities, not named Braavos, however, were essentially colonies to Old Valyria. Now, to compare that to a bit of the real world so you can get an idea of what that looks like or means, it's very similar to the early days of colonialism in North America, when the British began to develop the 13 colonies prior to the Revolutionary War. Now,
Valyria eventually met its doom in cataclysmic fashion as it quite literally blew up in smoke and fire. Now, I've always kind of imagined the events of Valyria and its doom very similar to Pompeii, if you've ever heard of that, just as another real world reference. But Pompeii times 100. Now, after Valyria was lost in its doom, most of the colonies that had been founded by Valyria essentially fell, as they lost the financial support as well as the threats and backing of the Valyrians and their dragons. However, the 9 free cities, including Bravos in that, right? The 9 free cities, as they're now known as today, earned that nickname as a result of slowly becoming fully autonomous and independent. They now became free to govern themselves when it came to internal affairs at first. Now, in order to become free, they had to start the process of slowly trying to pay or buy their freedom from old Valyria. As I previously stated, they each of the cities began as colonies of Valyria, and old Valyria, they did allow them to buy their freedom, but as I said, it initially started off as for only internal affairs. Meaning, if I had to once again compare it to the real world, right, I kind of view it as in the United States, the separation between the state and federal government for the different hierarchies of powers, laws, and regulations. Valyria is the federal government in that scenario, and the states would be the different free cities, right? That's kind of how I would view it. The 8 free cities then purchased their freedom and were then allowed to govern themselves by creating laws in different positions of power and even traditions amongst themselves within each of the 9 free cities. However, Valyria still overlooked the 8 cities and expected their support for taxes and any external affairs. Specifically, this is what prepared and allowed for these different cities to thrive once Valyria fell in its doom. So it's very interesting to see how far Illyrio's influence goes, as he has powerful friends in all of the free cities despite currently living in Pentos. Danny then informs us that Illyrio's influence goes even further beyond the free cities and names Vaes Dothrak in the fabled lands beside the Jade Seed. Now, what I want to focus on here is just Vaes Dothrak, as it is a city that is within the Dothraki Sea, which is home to the Dothraki. To best describe the Dothraki, I will now quote the Wiki of Westeros' page, and I quote, "The Dothraki are nomadic horse-mounted warriors who sweep across the vast central plains of Essos in search of plunder." So it's very interesting that Illyrio also has connections to the Dothraki as well, because for the most part, the Dothraki are feared by everyone in Essos and even in Westeros, due to how large of a group the Dothraki typically travel in. The Dothraki are also extremely dangerous and have their own laws, customs, and traditions amongst themselves, which is why they literally just do whatever they want whenever they're in the mood for it. The Dothraki can, however, be negotiated with, as we will soon learn. This is worth mentioning because they appear to almost value a good fight / raiding a city above all else in many ways. They are very much so a culture of warriors and fighters, and they value those sort of things more than anything else. They do, however, still find value in traditional monetary things such as jewels and gold and just regular treasure, which is what they demand when they appear outside a city's gates and walls. It's either you pay the Dothraki a ransom to leave you alone, or they will do everything they can to then enter your city and take whatever they want by force. Danny then continues to offer more information about Illyrio and who he is as a character, stating, and I quote, "It was also said that he'd never had a friend that he wouldn't cheerfully sell for the right price," which tells us that Illyrio is a massive piece of shit who truly only values gold and making a profit above all else, which is why Danny mistrusts him and finds it even more strange as to why he's helping Dany and Viserys to begin with. Now, I do want to take a moment here to point out that Illyrio in the books versus Illyrio in the show is one of the many characters that is a lot more interesting, and later comes back in the books later on in the series, and there's even ongoing theories about how he affects the plot with the most recent book, A Dance with Dragons. Now, that's just to compare Illyrio in the show, who I am pretty sure only shows up for like 2 episodes in the first season, and that's a maybe. But that's a pretty interesting adaptation of Illyrio's character, if you ask me. Dany, however, decides to keep her opinion about Illyrio to herself, but does state that the locals of Pentos are her sources of information on Illyrio, stating that she overheard different conversations about Illyrio while out and about within the city. She decides to keep this information to herself, however, and this is due to the fact that she knows if she continues to question or even doubt Viserys and his plans in any way, shape, or form, that she will anger Viserys. Dany's brother Viserys then places the dress that was gifted to Dany by Illyrio besides the door. That's when Viserys tells Dany, Illyrio will send the slaves to bathe you. And I also want to point out here that this is a pretty ironic line because they are in Pentos, which, as we covered just previously, is one of the 9 free cities. So this is confirmation early on that in the 9 cities, freedom is not for everybody. Dany's brother Viserys then lectures Dany about how she reeks of horses and mentions the name Khal Drogo for the first time. Viserys continues to make fun of Dany, stating how Drogo has over 1,000 horses, but now wants something different to mount. Viserys then begins to criticize Dany over her posture and her body, stating that she still slouches, and then he suddenly reaches out, grabs her, and forces her shoulders back so that she then is forced to stand up straight. Dany's older brother Viserys then begins to touch her body, telling her that she needs to show off her womanly figure to Drogo. And once again, I just feel the need to restate that Daenerys is 13 years old. Viserys then begins to pinch Dany's nipple, instructing her that she better not fail him tonight, because if she does, she will wake the dragon. He then twists her nipple, saying, and I quote, "You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?" Dany then describes the pain she's feeling, and I quote, "His fingers twisted her, the pinch cruel and hard." "No," Dany whimpers back in response. Viserys' entire demeanor changes upon hearing this, as it's exactly what he wanted to hear. He then strokes her head. Dany notes that she almost feels affection coming from Viserys when she does this, which is pretty fucked up. But Viserys then tells Daenerys that when they write the history of my reign, sweet sister, they will say that it began tonight, informing us that Viserys very much intends on retaking Westeros, aka the Seven Kingdoms, from Robert Baratheon, who is now the current king of Westeros, as he overthrew the Targaryen regime with his war entitled Robert's Rebellion. It's because of this Viserys and Daenerys refer to Robert constantly as usurper. If you'd like to know more about Robert's Rebellion, I've covered how it got started in a video that I made called Jon Arryn's Involvement in a Game of Thrones. Viserys then finally leaves Daenerys alone and exits her room. Dany then heads out to a nearby window so that she may look out and try to enjoy the view from Illyrio's mansion, clearly attempting to try and move on from what Viserys had just done to her. When Dany looks out the window, she hears people just outside the gates of Illyrio's property. She hears singing coming from people she instantly identifies as the Red Priest who worship the Lord of Light. Now, just to explain a bit about the Lord of Light, The Lord of Light is essentially a fire god that is mostly worshipped in Essos. The fire god, his name is R'hllor, and he's essentially meant to be the enemy of another god named the Great Other. Now, to describe the Great Other and get a little bit of a picture in your head, I would kind of compare him to the Night King from the Game of Thrones TV show. I say that primarily because the Night King does not exist in the books whatsoever. There is in the books, however, a legend about someone called the Night's King who lived thousands of years ago during the Age of Hero. But the Night King from the show and the Night's King from the book are very different and don't share much in common with one another, other than the name being somewhat similar. I'll explain the story of the Night's King in a future chapter, probably with Jon Snow. However, just to explain the Great Other from the book series, the Great Other is essentially a god that is believed to be worshipped by the others / White Walkers, which is another reason why the others in the books are so cool and interesting. Now, just to point out a few reasons as to why they're so much cooler in the books as opposed to the show. The others in the books have their own form of craftsmanship that's shown to us in the form of armor and weapons, plus their own culture, social hierarchy, language. They use different forms of magic, and they even domesticate animals and creatures. Coming across as very strategic with clear signs of intelligence. Versus in the show, the others really just got dumbed down to just be some kind of ice zombie. And all the ice zombies are controlled by the Night King somehow, some way. Good job, HBO. Now, to further explain the dynamic of the relationship between the Great Other and the Lord of Light, they are a nemesis of one another. They are meant to forever be in opposition of one another, represented by light and darkness, ice and fire. Now, I wanted to bring up R'hllor because there is an ancient prophecy that is meant to happen regarding the others returning to the world, which we know from the prologue chapter has already officially begun. This prophecy exists because of the others they attacked once before in the past in a war that was known as the Long Night, which is another example of the others representing darkness. The Long Night happened thousands of years ago, and it's said that in order for the Long Night to end, a man named Azor Ahai had to forge a magical sword named Lightbringer in order to end the Long Night and stop the White Walker threat. When the others returned, it said that Azor Ahai will be reborn since he is apparently an avatar of the fire god R'hllor, a quote-unquote chosen one. Now, there's plenty of speculation over who Azor Ahai will be when the Long Night inevitably happens again. Some people speculate Stannis Baratheon, the brother of the king Robert Baratheon. Some other people speculate Jon Snow. Personally, I believe it's Daenerys. The reason as to why will be revealed in a future video when we get through some more of the story. I do just want to tell all this information and let it be known because I just find it interesting that in Daenerys' first POV chapter, she hears Red Priest singing and chanting for the Lord of Light when she is potentially their fire god reborn. Another thing that Daenerys hears is children playing outside the gates of Illyrio's property. She then begins to become envious of the children running around, screaming, having fun, playing their little games out on the streets of Pentos. This serves as another instance of foreshadowing, as we now know she will be forced to marry this man named Khal Drogo, and will essentially be forced into womanhood, resulting in her losing the rest of her adolescence at the age of 13.